All right, time for the weekend check-in, sponsored by Hampton by Hilton. When your team needs you at your best, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay. The weekend check-in, let's check in on some teams with some very different Saturdays from a week ago. Okay, so I've got 3 teams that I'd like to check in with. Fan-based check-in starts with the Clemson Tigers. Told you I'd touch on them. Clemson fans have got to be thinking to themselves like, what? Because to be honest, I'm scrolling around. I'm watching games in the plane. I'm getting updates on my phone on Saturday. And in my mind, I'm like, this can't be right. Like there's a glitch, right? You mean to tell me that the team that did nothing offensively against Georgia is just smoking App State? Like smoking App State. 3 points and 188 total yards against Georgia. That's it. Now, maybe you could say, well, Joel, Georgia's elite. Fine. Fair enough. App State was receiving votes, which means that they're one of the, best 30, 31, 32, 33 teams in the country? 66 points, 712 yards against App State. That's unreal. So which one is it? Clemson fans, let's check in. Which one is it? And you know what? Cautiously, I'm optimistic because for the first time since last year, I can honestly say this is kind of what I wanted to start to see last season when Garrett Riley became your offensive coordinator. If you want to go all the way back, and I remember this because in hindsight, it was probably the prediction that I was most off on before last season in 2023 was this idea that Garrett Riley coming from TCU after that national championship run with Max Duggan and going to Clemson, he was going to improve Cade Klubnik and the offense, which had become very stagnant at Clemson. That was the thought. And I thought to myself, you know what? I trust it. I think that Garrett's really good, and I think Cade is talented, and I think that this is going to work. And I thought, you know what? Clemson's going to win the ACC. And then it didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. Maybe I was just a year early. Maybe we're just starting to see this come to fruition. Klubnik was 24 of 26 on Saturday for 378 yards, 5 touchdowns against App State, and he's the National Player of the Week. This is what I thought 15 games ago. Maybe it just took 15 games in order for them to develop and really learn the system. The opening schedule doesn't look so bad now that NC State in a couple of weeks and Florida State in 4 weeks don't look that great. You know, should they be favorite in the ACC? Probably not because of the way that Miami looks, but this is their toughest remaining games. NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pitt, South Carolina. All of a sudden, it doesn't look so bad. It doesn't look so bad. And the fan base, I would frame as we check in here, I would frame this as maybe this is a moment where Klubnik and Garrett Riley and the offense start to turn the corner. Okay, you don't have to face Georgia every week. And in fact, you can get better. And you know what? Maybe down the road, you're going to get another chance at Georgia. And maybe down the road, you're going to get a chance at Miami in the ACC championship game. But we wrote Clemson off because of the fashion in which they lost to Georgia. And I'm here to reel you back in and say, hey, let's check in here because Clemson, maybe you're starting to turn the corner here offensively. Maybe that was a sign of things to come. App State is no slouch. Maybe one of the top 33 teams in the country. And they absolutely hammered them. It wasn't even close. They scored their, I believe they scored their 42nd point at the 12-minute mark of the second quarter. It was wild. Next fan base we need to check in with. How about the Buckeyes? The Ohio State Buckeyes. Hey, Buckeye fans, how you feeling about this new squad, this new talented roster, this new play caller, and Chip Kelly? Ohio State has outscored their opponents 108-6 through two games, and they have yet to allow a touchdown. You might be thinking to yourself, like, Joel, they haven't played anybody. That's fine. That's fine. And you know what? They did exactly what they should do to those teams. Guess who would take that right now? Notre Dame, Oregon, any of those teams, right? What I'm looking at is this check-in on Chip Kelly. I'm starting to see this Chip Kelly effect. 273 rush yards and 6 touchdowns last week. That was a Western Michigan team, by the way, that led Wisconsin in the fourth quarter in week 1. So maybe they weren't nobody. Again, 273 rush yards. We have not seen that over the last few years. And in fact, I think that's been the one thing that's been hindering Ohio State more than anything is their inability to really control the game at the line of scrimmage. So now you've got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They're averaging 147 yards on over 7 yards per carry as a duo. So as we check in on Ohio State, you can say they haven't played anybody, but I'm checking in on Chip Kelly. I'm checking in on that run game. And all of a sudden, that looks extremely dangerous. Ohio State looks extremely dangerous. I understand that they have not had a marquee opponent like Georgia has had with Clemson, like Texas has had with Michigan to really showcase how good they are. I'm here to tell you, I think Ohio State is exactly who we thought they were. If we're checking in on Ohio State 2 weeks in, they are an elite team and a scary team. If that run game is reliable and the defense is as good as we think it was going to be, which it's proving that out on the field, it's going to be a really, really hard team to beat, a really hard team. So if I'm a fan of Ohio State, I feel great right now because what I hoped to see in the first 2 games, even against subpar opponents, I'm seeing. It's a great check-in right there, Ohio State fans. Next check-in. How we doing, Oregon? How we doing? Duck fans, how you feeling? How we feeling in Eugene? For the second straight week, Oregon escapes. Unconvincing win. Now a win, but unconvincing. Now this time, let's be fair, it's a walk-off win, but Boise. Boise's 3-0 against Oregon. They've got Ashton Jeanty. Won't be the last time I say his name in this show. They needed 2 special teams TDs to do this. One return was almost a huge blunder as they almost dropped the ball and really probably did drop the ball before the end zone. Jeanty ran all over him. I mean, Jeanty was phenomenal, and I thought that Oregon would be better at the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. The offensive line clearly has not gelled, trying to break in 2 new starters. We see them now giving up sacks at a rate that is frankly alarming as compared to last year. They've already given up more sacks in 2 games than they did all of last season. And those 2 opponents are Idaho and Boise State. So they haven't even gotten into the Big Ten schedule. Remember, they're going to have to face Ohio State. Granted, that game is at home, but they're going to have to see Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and they have problems in protection. If I'm checking in on the fan base of Oregon, I'm worried. I think that there is some real concern for Oregon because these are not fluky issues. When you have leaky protection, that persists. All of a sudden, you don't become great in pass protection. That is something that is a standard held prior to the season. It's not developed. It's not like physical nature in the run game that you can develop a solid run game. Can you get a little better in pass protection? Yes, but generally it's can you or can't you? That's the way that I've always felt. Big plays have absolutely saved the Ducks. 2 long pass TDs, 2 special teams returns. Boise outgamed them in that game last week, and they still won. 4 more sacks, man. 7 sacks. That's more than all of last year. And Jeanty, 192 yards. So Dan Lanning sums it up perfectly. If I'm checking in on the fan base, I just have to quote Dan Lanning. I have a sense of relief because of the result, but there are certainly a lot of things to fix. That's the mild version. The less mild version is it's borderline panic based on the expectations in the preseason in Eugene. Remember, everything has to be through the prism of expectation. That's why these teams that have played better than we expect, we're so excited about. That's why teams like Oregon that have played much worse than we expect, we're much more worried about. We're worried about Michigan. We're worried about Oregon. There's concern for both of those teams. They've got to fix some of those issues before they head into a Big Ten slate, or else this is not going to be the year that everyone thought it was going to be in Eugene. So things to fix there for Dan Lanning, a guy that I'm very high on, a roster that I'm very high on. I thought this team was going to be excellent. I thought they would bounce back and really play well against Boise State. And candidly, they didn't. They probably should have lost that game. Boise, in many respects, was the better team. That's the alarming part. That's why there's deep concern as we're checking in with the Ducks fan base. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.